Hello, and welcome to the Computing Conversations column. This column is from the November 2012 issue of IEEE Computer and is titled, Inventing PHP, Rasmus Lerdorf. There is supporting video material for this column that you can find in the IEEE Computer Society YouTube channel or in the IEEE Digital Library. I am the editor of the column, and I'm Charles Severance from the University of Michigan. Originally conceived as an HTML templating language, the hypertext preprocessor didn't start its life as a pure programming language. Instead, Rasmus Lerdorf created PHP in 1994 by collecting code and utilities written in C that he was using to build websites for various clients.
I was living in Mountain View, California, but I moved back to Toronto to do consulting. And I ended up consulting for a number of companies, and I wrote the same code over and over, basically CGI script written in C. And I wrote similar code to handle forms and post data and filtering and all the sort of common web things you end up having to write in C if you're writing raw C CGI programs. So that was getting tedious. I'm not very interested in programming. It's kind of tedious and boring. So if I could reduce the amount of time I had to spend programming and maximize the output and get to the solution quicker, that was my goal with PHP. I put together all my common stuff into a C library, hacked it into the NCSA web server, and then added a little templating system on top of that to let me easily call into it. And that was the first version of PHP. It was a productivity tool for myself.
The first version of PHP was simply a productivity tool that enabled Lerdorf to accelerate his development across multiple clients who needed web applications. PHP was quickly embraced by other web developers who continue to build on and improve it. In the web's early days, the developer community was small, so it didn't take long for Lerdorf's colleagues to find out about his software and start asking for copies for their own clients.
They asked me how I built these things, and I said, well, I'm using this little tool I built. And they asked if they could have it. I said, sure, why not? I mean, that's not what I'm selling. I'm selling my services of solving problems. The tool itself is irrelevant, really. It's just my hammer. Anybody can use my hammer, I don't care.
After other programmers started using it seriously, they found bugs, fixed them, sent him patches. Using these patches, he modified his utility library and templating engine and improved the applications he was building for his customers.
That's when open source really hit me. This was in 1994, 95, before the term open source existed. But it really caught on with me that I got together with a group of my peers, other people interested in the web and solving the web problem from all around the world. We all had similar problems. We faced similar issues. And collaboratively, we could build a tool that solved this problem. And that was really how PHP got off the ground.
Because PHP was initially conceived as a collection of library utilities rather than a new programming language, Lerdorf never felt the need to shape its future direction. He felt that PHP would thrive if he opened the codebase to other people and approaches.
I learned a bit along the way that in order for this to grow, I had to give up control of PHP. I had to let other people have some control. I couldn't rewrite everybody's patches, both because I'm pretty lazy and it's a lot of work, but also to give people some ownership in the project. And once they have some ownership, once they have full control over their part of it, then they become much more invested in it, and they become passionate, and it becomes theirs, not just them contributing to my project. It becomes our project. And that really changed the nature of PHP. And that happened around 1997 or so, where it really delegated it out and gave people full access to the CVS repository that I was using.
Once Lerdorf allowed other people to become involved in PHP's evolution, he quickly built a large following around the product.
It grew like crazy after that, both because the web grew and PHP was sort of in the right time, the right place, but also because it was very, very easy to get in and get started. Contributing to PHP and using PHP as well, obviously, has a very low barrier of entry. So both on the using PHP side and also contributing to PHP side, I try to keep the barrier of entry really low. It does not take much, even today, to get a CVS account in the PHP project. Source revision control is a wonderful thing. It doesn't really matter how bad the initial patch is from some contributor. We can always fix it. Much rather welcome new contributors and guide them along and get them to be productive and useful. We have close to 1,400 people with CVS accounts, which means they're Those people can all commit to some part of the repository, either PHP, Pear, Peckle, the documentation tree, anywhere in there. Now, they're not all active, obviously. We probably have maybe slightly over half the people have committed something in the last year and a half.
The only way to manage all those volunteers is to let them manage themselves. Within the PHP community, many small dedicated groups work closely together and focused on one aspect of PHP and collectively own it. Lerdorf prefers to let passionate volunteers move forward, even if they make little mistakes that need to be fixed later after their contributions are reviewed by more experienced members of the community. Through the PHP Extensions Community Library, Peckle, interested groups of volunteers can incubate an idea and then build interest in their feature. Once a feature is in broad use, it can become part of the core distribution, such as JSON extension in PHP 5.1.
That's sort of how new features and new things eventually creep in. They live outside of the core tree and they get enough penetration there, enough people install them. We see Linux distros pulling them in their core version of PHP. They pull in some of these things. So we sort of look at what's happening out there, and that happens. But there's no real management of that either.
In many open source projects, an individual or small group controls the project's architectural direction to ensure consistency across the product. Lerdorf even leaves architectural decisions about PHP to the community.
It's a meritocracy. I mean, code speaks. If you write a patch or you write a piece of code to implement a feature, that says a lot. If someone wants to disagree with that way of doing things, if they can offer an alternate implementation, that's a really good argument. If all they do is whine about it, that's a really bad argument, and chances are that the implementation will win, even though it may not be the best way of doing things. There's code, it sort of works, that's what we go with, and that's always been the default. It doesn't always lead to consistency, but it does lead to getting the features and actually being able to do something, being able to connect to this type of database, even though it may not be the best way of doing it. At least it gets you there, and that's always been what PHP is about, is solving the problem. We'd rather have an ugly feature than not having the feature at all.
When I asked Lerdorf about PHP's future roadmap, his answer was that it would match the web's evolution. As the web moves into new areas and uses new technologies, PHP needs to make those new technologies and approaches available to PHP developers. There's no master plan, except to be useful to people developing web applications. This column is from the November 2012 issue of IEEE Computer and is titled, Inventing PHP, Rasmus Lerdorf. There is supporting video material for this column that you can find in the IEEE Computer Society YouTube channel or in the IEEE Digital Library. I am the editor of the column, and I'm Charles Severance from the University of Michigan.